So I was also interested in where death anxiety fitted within the framework of something called terror management theory.
So terror management theory is a theory from social psychology, and essentially it argues that humans are so terrified of death that this terror kind of invades all of our day-to-day behaviors, and that the only way we can protect ourselves from the terror of death is through creating kind of defense mechanisms. So things like buying into what they call a cultural worldview, which is really the kind of ideas and values and belief systems of our culture. So this could be religious beliefs, like a belief in an afterlife. It could be things like nationalism. It could be voting for a particular political party. So according to people in terror management theory, we kind of buy into our cultural belief systems because we have a sense that we can live on through something greater than ourselves. So I, as an individual, might die, but I know that my culture is likely to live on for a long time after me. The other defense mechanism they suggest is self-esteem. So the idea is that if I can kind of tick the boxes of my cultural worldview, I'll feel good about myself as an individual. And I'll have a sense that I'm going to live a meaningful life and that I'm going to be remembered after I die. So if my cultural worldview is all about academic success, for instance, if that's something my culture praises and rewards, then every time I publish a paper, do a new study, give a talk, all of those things boost my self-esteem. And I feel like, yep, I'm contributing to my culture. People are going to reward and remember me for this. So those are the two kind of two of the three really defense mechanisms they've proposed. And we see from hundreds of studies that reminders of death drive people's behaviors in really kind of wacky ways you might not necessarily expect. So when you're reminded of death, for instance, they found you tend to spend more money on products, influences things like driving behavior, sun tanning behavior. All these really kind of different aspects of human behavior seem to be related to an underlying fear of death. So they show this in the lab by reminding, one group or one condition gets reminded of death. They just get asked to write a few sentences about their own death. The other group get a different topic, and then they just measure their behavior. So we can see kind of experimentally some of these effects of terror management theory being shown.
The conditions which they use are either mortality salience or control. What do they do to, I guess, how would you define mortality salience?
Yeah, it's a good question. So a mortality salience condition is really any situation where death is made salient to you in some form. So where you're made to think of death. So the most common way, and what we've done in our studies, is you just ask people two really brief questions. So you ask them, what emotions does the thought of death bring up in you, and what do you think will physically happen to you when you die? So that's the most common question. And usually those questions are buried in, packs of 10 other questionnaires, but we still see these effects. But they've done really interesting mortality salient things. So some of them, they do the study outside of like a cemetery. So for one group, they do the study outside of a cemetery. For another group, they do it in some... Yeah, even things like having a crucifix on the wall of the experimental room has been used as a mortality salience prime. So even a kind of religious image of death seems to lead to these same effects. So they have some kind of creative ways of doing it, but I've stuck to the boring, write us a little mini essay on how death makes you feel.
Right. I suppose it explains why people drink at wakes and funerals.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it does, yeah.
Deep Trouble is produced by Steve Charman in the studios of Main FM, Castle, Maine.
The Deep Trouble podcast is presented by Trouble Magazine at troublemag.com. Thanks for listening.